So I was sitting there eating my dinner, watching PTI, as everybody in America should do, PTI, great show. And Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser were talking about the college football playoff. And Mike Wilbon went on to say how this the blowouts that keep seeming to be happening in the semifinal games and even in the championship games, we've seen a couple in the championship games and definitely a lot in the semifinal games, is reason to put an expansion argument to end. And I was like, well, I don't agree with that. I think it's the opposite. I think having these blowouts in these poor games, these large build-up games, should lead to want expansion, to want more teams to get cracks at the top teams. Personally, I would love to see a 16-team playoff and a shorter regular season, but that is very far-fetched. An 8-team playoff is a lot more far-fetched, and I think both are better options and should happen and should be heavily considered. I would love to see the 16-team playoff. I think you should cut down the teams play 12 regular season games and then one conference championship game. I think you should cut it down to 10 regular season games. And honestly, you could throw the conference championships out the window. You could throw conferences in general out the window. I really don't care. Do it how you want. I don't care. So let's take a look at the rankings. First, we'll start with the 18 playoff. This year, an 18 playoff would have had Alabama versus Mississippi State versus Ole Miss. I'm sorry. Alabama versus Ole Miss in the 1 versus 8 game. Baylor versus Michigan in the 2 versus 7 game. Georgia versus Ohio State 3 versus 6. And Cincinnati versus Notre Dame rematch 4 versus 5. I think this would have gave us much better games. Ole Miss gets another crack at Alabama. As we know, Matt Corral got hurt in their game against Baylor. But that could have not happened if he's playing Bama. Lane Kiffin would, I'm sure he'd probably find a way to gather more points than 6 like Cincinnati did against Bama's defense. Michigan versus Baylor, it would be another good game. I think that's two teams that are shockingly got as far as they got. So that game would be interesting just because I don't think both of those teams deserve to make it to the next round, but one of them will. Georgia versus Ohio State would be an amazing game. I don't think anyone would say no to that. I think Ohio State has the offense to give the Georgia defense a run for its money. We saw how well they played against Utah, so I would love to see that matchup. Who knows who wins it? I'd probably have to go Georgia. And then Cincinnati versus Notre Dame would be a great rematch. A lot of talk about if Notre Dame could possibly jump Cincinnati for the final playoff spot. They didn't, and Cincinnati disappointed everybody, but Notre Dame would get their crack at Cincinnati again, and Cincinnati would get to prove why they deserve to be the 4 seed. And you could flip the rankings, however, based on if it was actually this were the matchups, and you could play around and maybe make it so Michigan doesn't play Baylor first round, maybe switch Baylor and Ohio State just so Ohio State plays Michigan again first round, and Georgia plays Baylor, whatever. I don't really care, but I think you got to expand this way. You have less regular season games, less games where a team's just getting absolutely killed. Like there's no reason for Alabama to play New Mexico State in a game in any sort of game. It is we know who's going to win before the game starts. There's no need to have it. It's just kind of unfair to New Mexico State. I know they get a lot of money, but let's be better than that. Um, Alabama would have to play. They'd have to play Ole Miss round one. They'd have to play winner of Cincinnati Notre Dame, and then have to win the national championship. So it'd just be an extra game for them. And an extra game, who knows? But things happen. I'm not going to say an injury, but because people are going to complain about, oh, there's too many players. Well, I'm going to take a game off the regular season. So don't give me any of that garbage. And I'd make it so there's only one bye week. I think teams have way too much time to prepare, and just the better team has so much time to prepare, and the talent always seems to prevail. The better team always ends up winning, and it never seems to be close. You give Nick Saban 4 weeks to come up with a game plan for a team that he's more talented than, of course you're going to get a blowout. It's just simple. But let's take a look at 16 to playoff. This is what I would prefer. Looking at the top 25 rankings right now, these are the final rankings. I don't know if this is the college football playoff or the AP pool. You have OU at 16. You're telling me Oklahoma would not give Alabama a better run than Cincinnati did? I would much rather watch Oklahoma play Alabama than Cincinnati. I don't see the only thing I don't have a problem with this is Iowa at 15, but we're looking at Clemson at 19 who ended up winning their bowl game. If Clemson found a way to get to 17 ahead of some other teams, if Clemson was 16, OU was 15, you could see Clemson would give Bama a run for their money. Clemson played Georgia tighter. Clemson played Georgia the tightest of anybody this season before Alabama did. Like Clemson, Georgia was a one-score game. You got Oregon in there who beat Ohio State. Who knows what they do? Utah just played a great game against Ohio State. They're sitting at 10. They're sitting at 11 right now. So they'd be matched up against Baylor. I think Utah would win that game, and then you'd have Utah a double-digit seed in the second round. So And if you want to do 12 and give some of these teams buys, that's fine with me. But just looking at teams that I would put in this top 16, I'd have Clemson at 16, OU at 15, Oregon, BYU, Pitt, Utah, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, Baylor, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, UGA, Michigan, Alabama. That's my top 16. If they let me select it for some reason, they won't. But kid getting home, right? But you got Clemson, who has first round draft picks. Oklahoma, who has tons of talent, first round draft picks all over that roster. Oregon has Kayvon Thibodeau, the best player in the country. He's going to go on the draft. BYU, their quarterback's legit. Give him a chance a game. Zach Wilson would have loved that opportunity. Pitt's got Kenny Pickett. He's legit. He's a first rounder. Utah just showed that they can compete with anybody. They've beat Oregon twice this season. Michigan State's got an elite running back. And you just keep going up the list. Mike Gundy, great coach. Ole Miss has got Matt Corral. Baylor's found a way to win tough games. Like, these teams are legit enough to deserve a shot. So college football is deep enough in teams to have a 16-team playoff. It's definitely going to be considered. And especially with the more and more we have blowouts, the more and more you want to see better games. March Madness first round always has blowout, but there's less blowouts as it gets forward. And who wouldn't love to see a college football Cinderella story?